So in this video, we're going to be looking at jQuery. We just got done looking at JavaScript, and by no means have I shown you everything there is to know about JavaScript, nor could I possibly show you every thing or scenario you're going to be in with JavaScript. But when you start coding and over your careers, you're going to realize that sometimes it's just easier to use tools that other people have created, right? You don't have to create Google Docs every time to write a document or Microsoft Word because that's already been done for you. jQuery is just a library, which means a compact code that you use that is still JavaScript, but it allows you to write a lot less of it. And it's incredibly helpful. And it's just a lightweight library. Now, the words lightweight compared to library may not mean anything to you right now, but as you proceed in your careers, you'll generally understand what that means. And so it just aims to make the JavaScript that you have to do easier to pull off. The syntax is much nicer to look at for the most part. And there's a lot of things that can be done with just one quick line of code, which is pretty sweet. And we're going to see a lot of examples. According to Google, about 95.4% of websites use jQuery. According to Quora, it is 77. This may surprise you because it's kind of an older language. It was released in 2006, which is considered ancient in terms of how quickly technology iterates and becomes better. But it definitely has staying power and will continue to have that for quite some time. And so it's worth getting to know because you may have a job where there's jQuery that exists, or jQuery just pairs very well with the technology, and it's just at least nice to recognize the syntax. And so keep in mind that just because something is newer, with respect to jQuery, it doesn't mean that the industry should drop everything and switch to, said new technology. Everything costs money, and if something isn't broken, in most cases, don't fix it, unless you could earn more money by cutting costs. So just because there's a new shiny object out there that may end up being the next big thing, think about how much time and money it would be to change everything in jQuery to, say, React or Angular or Svelte or other libraries and frameworks out there you may or may not have heard of, because that is less time doing business requirements that earn money and time spent, and developers aren't cheap, doing, code updates. So you kind of have to weigh, especially when you make a project at the beginning, are you really sure and banking on the technology that you're using? And so to continue, what is jQuery? And we could break it down into a few subsections here. And we've already talked a little previously, but we could think of it in terms of things like simple selectors. It uses what is already familiar with browsers and just shorthands it to do what we already need to do. And there's more intelligence and fail-safes when accessing and manipulating the DOM. So think about the little mess-ups, typos. There may be corner cases you've already seen or will discover, and where your code works 99% of the time, but in this 1% case, it bombs out and fails, right? And because these people who maintain this library have seen those scenarios, they've gone ahead in the library and made the, ability of this library when using selectors and finding things in the DOM a little bit easier and safer to use than if you were to do it yourself, which is nice. You always want to use technology that tries to handle bad situations the best it can. Another thing that we can think of is less code. And yeah, less code, literally. You should be writing less code. Now, that doesn't mean you will have less code. You may have a lot of code, but it will still be ratio-wise way less than if you used regular JavaScript. Another aspect is built-in functionality to do common tasks with one simple command. If you want to access the parent of something, it's, I believe, just .parent of an element in the DOM. You're going to see the power and the terseness, the shorthand in our upcoming examples. And also there'll be enhanced readability with less code and very easily named simple commands. It will also enhance the ability for you to read the code, for you to come back later and read the code when you've forgotten what you've coded, and for your coworkers and, fellow students as well. It's also very browser friendly, with Internet Explorer being dead, which is good because no one liked it. There's going to be no issues with jQuery, and it works on all browsers, which is super cool. Now, another aspect of jQuery are libraries. There's other libraries out there other than just jQuery. And one of them I'm going to show you right now is jQuery user interface. We're not going to get into this too much unless there's a demand, or willingness to in the comments or, per students. And this is another library built on jQuery, and it's a way to, create, more, I guess, fluid UIs, websites that are based on jQuery. So you'll be using familiar technology throughout the entire experience. Another one here is jQuery mobile, and it says it's no longer supported, which is, fine. But even when you use something like jQuery and something may or may not be supported, anymore, whenever you take on a new library, it may not just be that single library like React that you need to know. There may be other things in the quote ecosystem that could support the technology you're using. So if I want to use jQuery, maybe I want to use jQuery interface. Maybe I want to do jQuery mobile, even though it's no longer supported, right? So don't think you're just locked into only using jQuery. There's often a lot of people who make supplemental libraries on top of what you use to make your overall experience in making web applications easier. Now, what we're going to see in the upcoming examples, and it's not exhaustive by any means. I would be here for weeks making videos, showing you all the stuff you could do with jQuery in and out. But we're going to try and break this down into kind of two sections here. And that is jQuery when it comes to finding stuff. There's going to be, your basic selectors, filters, ways of sifting through content and looking through it. Insanely easy to do. And then we're going to be looking at manipulating stuff. So stuff with content, finding things, getting the dimension and or position of an element, animating things, and then the events when you click or do something, then something on the page changes, moves, or comes alive in some way. So this is the section right here where it's just words and probably means nothing. But let's actually get into the examples. And what we're going to start off first is a more animation-y, fun, I feel, example. And then after that, we're going to work with CSS, general attributes, inserting content, and then traversing the DOM. And this should give you a really good idea of how to use jQuery and then build upon those skills. So in this first example, and I think the many examples we're going to do, since we've already worked with CSS, done the obvious things with HTML, and done stuff with JavaScript, I think it'd be best just to do a bunch of, I don't want to say full mock-up websites, but, just more examples, more heavy coding in general, maybe compared to some of the other stuff that you've seen where it's a few lines of code and then you see a change happen. So with this first one, we're going to use jQuery. We're going to bring it on in through a CDN, which for us means just a link. And then what we're going to do is do kind of the fun stuff first, which is show you how to hide elements, then show them again, fade them in and out, and then move them around and, do some stuff like that. So let's get to just putting some of the markup on the page, and then we're going to style it, and then we're going to add the jQuery. So first I want to show this right here. Usually what I do is like I code and then come back and talk, and I didn't want to be away for a while, but this is going to be the main focus of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be manipulating this paragraph tag right here. We have the ID example. So just to let you know, this is what we're going to do. And for design purposes, we're going to have 2 rows put right here of buttons. And these are, when we click on them, what we're going to do is, I know that looks like trash right now. This thing is going to start doing some, interesting things for us. So now we have these buttons right here, and rather than go and make the rest of the stuff down below, what I'm now going to do is introduce the CSS and just focus on these 4. And once we get through coding these, we'll come back through, finish up these buttons right here, and then just kind of loop the process over again. So now that we have our CSS file here, once again, keep in mind, I'm not a good designer, so this still will need some massaging. And I'm going to bring in again, because I've still been on this weird linear gradient kick, no matter how ugly I make it look, to add that stuff in. So we're going to make our H1, so let's give it a font size. Let's do 68 pixels here. And for standards on these, this is just for, I don't want to say like good aesthetics, but because there's not a lot going on the screen, I kind of want the text and the things we're going to move to pop out a bit more. Just because maybe for some of us, our eyes, or maybe even there may be some things that we ask some of these elements to do that may be subtle. And so if an object is larger doing something subtle, it's much more noticeable. I don't think we'll have that problem here, but you never know, just in case. So now we have this styled. It was up here, the paragraph tag. I moved it down here only because of some of the other things that we're going to be asking it to do when we get to this bottom row of buttons here we have not yet created, but they'll look much like this. They'll just be, 4 buttons down below. So we click these and nothing quite happens, and that's good. We don't want anything to happen yet. Now what we need to do next is bring in our jQuery, the actual link. And there's more than one way you could do this. I prefer using the link for just instructional purposes. And you could always download the project and bring it in and use it that way. But I'm just going to show you kind of a quick and dirty way of doing it. So let's go ahead and add in what we need. So I'm copying and pasting this in. And what I'm going to do is, since I already have my index, HTML, JS, and then my style.css file, I'm going to collapse this to make things readable. So I'm bringing this in above. Why is that? Because sometimes when you bring in other libraries, it'll tell you order really matters. And we want to load in the jQuery first, so that way this file, when it gets loaded in, even though there isn't anything in here, this file will look and say, oh, you've already loaded in all this content. Now I could actually start using it. And so just remember that if something is out of order or something kind of funny happens in your code when it loads, go ahead and check these scripts and make sure you're loading things in a logical order. So we're going to come up here into index, and we're going to do this. So now we have this right here. We have the document and ready. So when it's ready to load, and then we have this like anonymous function. You notice there's no name. It doesn't say when page loads or anything like that. This is just going to run and essentially prepare the code when the page loads for it to be ready, to be used. So let's go ahead and look at hide. So we have this ID right here of hide. If you're looking in here, we already have this document. In our previous JavaScript examples, we would have stuff like document dot, get element by ID. But let's see how we actually get a hold of something once we've loaded this all in. So looking at this, we have this, hashtag, or, this is the identifier for an ID, just like we have in CSS. You see right here, the ID example, we know we're getting an ID, and look above, the pop-up says element ID equals example. Whereas if we go over this, we know that JQ-buttons is a class. So we're telling it, hey, get something with the ID of this. Let me undo that error. And then we're going to click on it. And then we have what we have up here, which is another anonymous function in here. It does not have a name, but we click, we're just going to do something. We don't need to give it a name, but what is it we're going to do? So if we're getting a hold of a button and clicking it, then how do we hide this? Well, we need to select, give it an action, and then we need to repeat the process then and get, I don't know why I did that. Get that ID, that paragraph element. We'll save it. Yeah, it tightens it up here, so it's all kind of jammed together. And let me just, let me try to do this. Hide. Oh, it's still, well, at least we have some space here. Sometimes you love auto format. Sometimes you just want to throw your entire computer out the window. I wouldn't recommend that, but sometimes it is annoying. So since we do have that hot reload, it should auto save or auto process this. So I'm not going to ruin my formatting. So now we're getting the button, but when we click it, which is the, essentially the event listener, we're going to give it an action, and then we're going to look for something that has, the ID of example, and then we're going to hide it. So let's go and see this work. And we see, bam, it's gone. But does it come back? And the answer is it's no, it's not there at all. So let's inspect this. Let's go into the body, and this may be hard to see, but we still see that it is in fact there. We're just hiding the text. We're not going to go and, blow it away. Now, are there examples later on I'm going to show you where we can just blow something away via jQuery? Oh, 100%. But this is just hiding the text. So keep that in mind. Some people, when something comes off the screen, they think it disappears completely. And that is, not the case for this. As we see right here, it's actually manipulated in CSS, and it's doing a style display none, which is interesting. So let's say we want to come in and show that element again. How do we do that? Well, let's come up here and let's copy this. But now we don't want hide. We want the ID of show. So we're going to come in here, change that to show. We're still dealing with the example. We're going to be dealing with the example this entire time, so that's all right. And all we have to do is do show. Let's make this text disappear, and then let's make it reappear. Hey, that's pretty cool, right? And think about, it's not a ton of work, but think about all that you would have to do with JavaScript to pull this off, right? It's much more, it's tighter, right? It's syntactically tight, and it's still JavaScript at the end of the day. It just, someone wrote, a ton of code to allow you to write less code, which is pretty cool. So say that I didn't want to just hide and show. Maybe I wanted to do something with a fade, but there's different kinds of fades. So we're going to do a fade out and then a fade in. Once again, we'll come up here. You're going to copy and paste this. But once again, we don't want to use show. We want to use fade right here. We're still going to focus on example, but instead of show, we could do fade out, and we could put a numerical value in here, but let's just type in slow. This is also acceptable. We could use a string and it'll know what we want. And that's what's cool with jQuery. You could use strings like this, or you could use numbers for more precision if you want to. And in the next example, when we get to slide, we'll see that we could give it numerical values to change how it does its work. So we have fade in, fade out, or fade out then fade in, if I could read left or right. So this is hide, this is show. So this thing should fade out and then fade back in very slowly. Hey, that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome right there. Let's do that one more time. Fade out, and then it fades right back in. Cool. Once again, let's save or copy this. Come on in, and I've already alluded to it. Now let's do a slide up, slide down. Going to come over here. We're going to see that we have slide. Come in and type it out. We're still targeting this example right here. And just like before, we could do slide up, but maybe we just want the default value to play here. And so I believe this is in milliseconds right here. So this is 3,000 milliseconds, whatever that's equal to in regular seconds. I think it may be 1 second. Don't quote me on that, but just know that this is not like 3,000 minutes or hours or something. It's a very, very, very brief time, because when you're dealing with visual effects on the screen, you want to do it in milliseconds or some very, very, very small subset of time, because you don't want stuff to take forever. You want much more granular control of the screen, because if a user is waiting past 30 seconds to appear, right, maybe even like 2 seconds, at the max, they'll think your website's broken and it sucks and they don't want to go back to it. So that's why things are in milliseconds typically. So let's do this slide. Oh, that's cool. But we actually kept the fade in. But you saw that though, even though I screwed up, which is fine. That's, life of a developer. Slide up and then it fades back in. We could also do a slide down. Kind of got some extra stuff there for me. Slide up. There it comes right back in. So now what I'm going to do is come in here, and I'm going to finish out the rest of the buttons in here, because now we're going to get into animations, getting values, and getting some dimensions and some other stuff like that, just to give you kind of a little bit of a preview before we start working on very specific stuff. So first I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come into here, and I realize that not everyone has the, shortcut stuff down. But I do recommend looking at Emmet, but also looking at VS Code on how to get up and going quickly. I think all I do is hit Alt, and I can multi-select different lines and start doing stuff. I'm not super advanced with VS Code and all the shortcuts, so just because I move fast on some stuff, you'll get there eventually. It's not like I'm doing rocket science. So first we're going to have animate me, and then animate revert. Then we're going to have a get val for value, and then we're going to have get dim for dimension. So now we have click to animate here. Click to restore via animate, and you'll see why in a second. Click to get value. Then click to get dimensions. I know these last two may not be fun. You want to get to the animation and like the, the fun stuff here, but you will eventually have to do some of the more boring work, I guess. And it's also super nice having a library do that for you. So now what we're going to look at is how to animate. And what we're going to do first is that the first one, we're just going to move something. And so this is going to be pretty easy to do. And there's a few things I need to explain, but let's copy this. And we have the slide. We don't want that. We come over here. We see animate me. We'll type that in. And then we'll remove all this slide stuff. And we're going to type animate. It's not like I memorized this. I just, I looked it up. Let's do left 250 pixels. And part of the reason why this is going to work is because example, as you can see, is an absolute position. If it was in its, regular static position, it would be kind of like locked into place. So now that this is absolute and, removed and we can move it around on the page, now we could come in with our jQuery and move it freely ourselves. So let's get this out of the way here. So now let's go ahead and click animate. And we see that it moves over. We click animate again. It's not, constantly moving over. It's just going to the left position right here. So let's come in now and let's actually remove, or at least move it back to where it came from. So we're going to take this and there may be a temptation here to come in and do, well, we moved it there, but what if we do negative 250, right? And that is wholly different than what we just asked it to do because you have to think of where it starts. So what we're just going to do is make this 0. So now we're going to move it there. We see that it moves right back, and that is because it is firing this off and then firing animate me because I forgot to go in and do animate -revert. So now things should work as planned. Animate revert, which is pretty cool there. The next thing we're going to do is get the value of the text here. And we're going to alert it out to the screen. And so the value is essentially the like textual value. So I'm going to come up here and grab this. And I believe this was called getVal. Let me double check. Coming over here, we see getVal. All right. Going to delete this all out. And all we're going to do is just do this. We're going to do an alert. And then load up our jQuery in here. So we're going to come in and click value. And it says example. So my bad. I meant to say text. I should have said the text of the ID here itself, which is example. My bad. That was a misspeak on my part. And so we're coming in and we're saying we want to get the example, and then we want the attribute of the ID itself. So in case we want to, we're not always going to be alerting things to the screen, but maybe somewhere in our code we want to identify or look for, a specific, maybe a type or a name or an ID or a class because we want to do something with it. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a dimension here. So we're going to come in, we're going to do getDim, and let's just come in take this, we're gonna do this, and then we have, let's just do this, something as easy as this, width. So now we're gonna come in and let's click get dimension. And so this is the dimension, or say the width of the example right here. And so even though you may be thinking this is utterly useless, why would I need it? You may want it because, well, one, debugging reasons is always helpful when you're trying to figure out or add, you know, how wide or how much space something is taken up. But also, you may have other animations. You may be making a game. You could be doing other things where location, width, size, height, that kind of stuff comes into play. And so what may not be obvious now to you is super available and easy to use with a very, very simple selector and then dot width. And now you have returning to you the value, the width value of this right here, which is pretty cool. So this is the first section, intro to jQuery, kind of showing you the fun stuff here. And what we're going to be looking at for the next section is we're going to be looking at manipulating CSS and then manipulating elements and attributes, inserting content, and then DOM traversing. And that should give you overall a very nice sense and feel of how jQuery works. And then you can start going off and doing your own projects. In this section, we're going to look at jQuery and CSS. We're not actually, well, I mean, we are going to use CSS, but we're not going to use an external file. We're going to do everything within the head here, which is probably the only time I will ever do CSS this way. But what I'm going to do is come in here. We're going to add the style. And then just make a simple class like this. So now let's add our elements to the screen. I really wish it didn't do that. I wish it would just auto format for me. Now I do know that as far as ID goes, it's kind of weird to have a button with an ID of H1 and then H1, actually this should say remove. Because it's not very, you know, good naming. We may want to give it a different kind of name. But for now, since this is a very small example, you know, what I want is when we go into the jQuery and get this, we know it's going to be for the H1. Maybe we could do something like we could do this for now, but just keep in mind that you are going to be working with files eventually that are, you know, this is only what, 24. You may be working with some that are a few hundred lines long. And so you want to be as precise as you can about what you're naming things and why. So let's just keep this h1-add-css just to make this a bit easier on us. So it's a little bit more descript. So then what we're going to do next is we're going to come into here and we have our buttons doing nothing, change my class. Then we have our, you know, kind of our boilerplate jQuery ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is change the class. This is really adding a class. So we'll go ahead and type this in here. And it's just like what we've seen in the last video. We're going to do this, which means we're targeting the ID of H1. We're going to click it. Use the fat arrow function right here. And all we're going to do actually, it's going to be add CSS. See, I have my notes off to the side, and then I proceed, forgetting I updated my notes. So now we have this. So now that we're actually going to get the H1, we're going to add a class. Just a simple command. Make big. Now this is the issue I get into sometimes, is that sometimes I'll come in here and add a dot, right? Because that dot, class, when you go into CSS, makes sense. But really, you just need to provide the name of the class. It already knows it's going to be a class, so it already knows that there's going to be like a dot there. So if it's not adding the class, make sure you have this down right, and make sure you're just giving a class name. You don't have to provide any qualifiers in front. So now we have the button. When we click it, we're going to make it do some functionality, cool, fun stuff. And we're going to select the H1 element right here. If we had this, it would be an ID. If we had a, dot, it's just the H1 element here. Or I should say all H1 elements in the page. And so we're going to come in. We see that gets a lot bigger, does that blue-violet color. And if we come in here, let's actually restart this. So we see here it says change my class. We click this. We see that the class is now make-big. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. But what if I wanted to do something like, I don't know. What if I wanted to say toggle it, like turn it on and off? I could do that as well. And we're gonna see how to remove the class too. But you should be able to toggle it. So we're gonna come in here. I'm gonna paste this in, and we're just gonna type toggle class. So I'm just commenting this out. You could delete it. It's not a big deal. Or if you forget, you could always look it up later. So we have toggle class, and we see gets big, adds the class in right here, and then it removes it and goes back to its, default H1 size. So that's kind of cool. So let's come in here and let's copy this. We're going to move down. And we're going to do remove class, because you may not always want to toggle. It really depends upon your scenario. And it may feel like you have a ton of options in front of you, but it's always better to have a ton of options, because there's always going to be a ton of user scenarios that pop up. So you see it's as simple as this. Yeah, we're still going to use toggle, which we could turn it on. We're not going to click the button again. But we could come down to H1 remove, click it, and then it's removed the class. So we click this, it gets bigger. We click this, and it removes the class. This is a simple example on how to toggle, add, and remove CSS classes to your elements using jQuery. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see y'all in the next section. So in this section here, what we're going to do is we're going to take jQuery, and what we're going to do is manipulate some of the attributes and elements and all other stuff on our page. So we already have our title. We don't need a CSS file. It's just our index and our regular index.html file. We're bringing in the jQuery here. We're linking in our JavaScript right here. So let's get to making our simple layout. So we have this H1 right here. We have Ultra Me. I changed it halfway through because I just figured it was a more appropriate name. We have these three buttons: remove content, remove entirely, and remove attribute. So let's go ahead and start writing the code to allow us to do these things. So now that we're in here, what we're going to do is we're going to click this, our ID for H1 here for remove content, and we're going to just do something very simple, and that is just wipe the text that is there. So we're going to remove content, but still exists in DOM. So let's get that going. We're selecting the ID with a pound sign there. And then we're just going to come in and declare it empty. So let's go ahead and fire this off. And we see that the text is gone. Everything moves up. We click the body here, and we still see that the H1 element is here, but it has no text value. So that is a way to remove the content. We're not going to, we're just going to refresh it to add the content back in there. The next thing we're going to look at is how to remove it entirely from the DOM. We're going to copy this here. Going to write in remove from the DOM itself. So I'm going to come up here and do this, remove, instead of empty, which means an empty, it's like you have an empty bucket, but the bucket is still there, right? We come in and just type remove. We see it exists here, alter me, the name, example, all that stuff. And we see instantly now it's been removed from the page. We're going to refresh this, bring it back in. So the next thing we want to do is remove an attribute. And so we're going to just take this right here, and we're going to keep remove. We're going to do attr. Never mind that auto suggests there. And we're going to remove the attribute. And the thing for this is remove -att. So we're going to come in here. We see that there's this name equals example. And we see now it's just a regular H1 element with alter me. It's been removed. But I forgot to say this at the beginning. What if we want to add, say, some kind of attribute? Let's come in here, and it's not too much more complex. We could just come in and say this. attr, we'll give it a name. And then let's call it, Bernie. So now let's create another button in here. Add attribute. We should see it right here. Awesome. Come back into the code here. Add. So now we're going to do this. We're going to sack this. We're going to remove the attribute so it's gone. And then let's come ahead and add it in. And we see now we have a name equals to Bernie. If we wanted to add any other kind of attribute, we could. We would just give the attribute argument here. So we're going to give it the name. And then this is the value that's going to be applied to that attribute. And this is how you're able to work with elements and attributes in your jQuery. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next section. In this section, what we're going to be looking at is inserting content into our page. And we already have our jQuery pulled in, and there's no CSS file. We have our other index file we're going to be working with, so this is all we need. So let's get going to making our basic page here. We're going to need an H1 element. We'll just call this main right now. And then we're going to make 4 different buttons. So we have these 4 buttons: add text, add content before, and add content after. This should give you tip you off that we don't have just to slap, only have the ability to slap stuff onto the bottom of the body. This thing here, we're actually going to start having a choice. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and add our IDs in so that we're able to, start using them. So we have our H1. Well, actually, let's rename this to H1 text here. And then we have our H1 content, and then content before, and then after. So this should tell you that we're mainly going to be focusing on this right here. So let's go in. We already have our boilerplate stuff set up. So let's go ahead and add some text. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our H1 here. which is our button. And so when we click it, we're going to make this fat arrow function right here. Not do that. Give it some spacing. And then we're going to come in. We're going to find main, which is our H1 element. And we're just going to append this is new. I don't know why we did that. Maybe I forgot to type it. That could happen too. There we go. And so this H1 text actually, let's update that. So we click this button right here. It's going to look for it and says, okay, you're going to click it. And then when you do that, look for this thing that has the ID of main. And then we're going to append this is new to it. So we're going to come in here. We have this is new. Let's inspect. Let's refresh this. We click this button here. We're going to click on this. It finds it for us in the DOM. Add text. And we see now that it has add some text, which was there from the beginning, but then it added in this is new. If we were to do it again, it would keep appending on to this. So it looks at the button, and then it looks for the thing called main, which is this, and it just slaps some text to the end of it. But what if we wanted to, add some, content to our page? So let's go ahead and do something where we could add something to our body. So let's do add content, adds to inside of element. We can think of this as nested, right? So we could think of it as, these H1, these buttons and these scripts are nested. They're, essentially children of the body. So when you hear children, you think of a relation between the H1 and the body, but nested also is referring to, is something the child of or within something else. So when you hear nested, that's just another way of, I guess, saying children. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this right here. And this one's going to be a little bit more complex than before. Not by much, but it's some very easy steps. So instead of H1 text, what are we going to do? Let's get H1 content, because we're going to add some content. All right. And let's go ahead and remove this append here. And we're going to do some stuff with it. So we keep our scope. Let's use let instead of var, which is a good practice. That way we don't want any hoisting going on. And let's go ahead and just do this. H1, edit text. All right, that's cool. And then we're going to close this off. We're going to come in here. Let's do let paragraph. We're going to do document.create element. Where we have to add some text to it, right? So we're going to do inner HTML. We're going to give it this emphasis right here. I'm ready for 6 figures. I'm sure we all are that are watching this, right? And then we're going to come into here and we're going to append to this. And so we're going to append the heading and then the paragraph here. So let's go ahead and save. Let's come in. Everything is as it was before. And so now we have this stuff here. Let's go ahead and click on it. We could see that this is nested inside of the H1 here. So we have, this is the parent element, and then we have the H1 on the inside, and then the paragraph in here. And if I was to do this again, the H1 would be the outermost parent. Now, I typically would not recommend this. You could easily start screwing stuff up when you start appending stuff to elements that you don't need to. So let's refresh this, erase it. Now let's just come down here and just look for the body. So we want to append things just to this. So let's slap something on here. And now it's at the bottom. It's not, bloated, weird, strange. The H1 inside of the H1 isn't bigger than the parent H1. We could keep adding, and we could keep adding it infinitely to the bottom there. So we refresh by hitting this button up here, by reloading it. And that's how you just start slapping content to the, something and make it nested. So if something goes wrong, make sure you're not accidentally nesting it in something you're not supposed to. So the next thing we want to do is, let's go ahead and copy this, and let's add content before. We're going to come into here, and let's get main, which is going to be the ID, once again, of this H1 element here. And we're going to keep this the same. We're not going to do anything new. This is going to be the same as this up here, because we're going to just do these piecemeal. And instead of append, we're going to do before. All right, so that's really nothing much. We are making a heading, and then we're adding a, some paragraph, some text, and it appears before. We're going to slap the heading, and then the paragraph is going to follow. So let's do content before. Nothing is happening. Why is that? And that's because we actually have to update this. So we have hyphen before to add. Once again, that is a mistake on my part, and you're going to make billions of them in your career, and that's cool. I still get paid. You will too, it's no big deal. So you see that content before it's going before this, and it's saying, let me start this over again. Hey, let's add some stuff in here. So now we have this add some text here, which is what we started with, but it adds the H1, and then immediately after it adds the paragraph with this then child element in here to make it italicized. Well, that's pretty cool, right? So now we have the ability to easily control where stuff just goes on our page. So if we could do it that way, let's just copy all this over. We'll come down here, and if we could do it before, let's just do it after. We'll come in here, make sure, yep, it's after. And so now instead of appearing up here, it should appear down here. And we see, in fact, it does. We could also add stuff up here. And this is how you choose different points on how you could, enter your content, and how you could nest your content, and how you could just start slapping text on in case you need it. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next section. In this last section, what we're going to do is look for ways to traverse the DOM. And really this boils down to asking, for parents, children, relationship to other things on the page. Because as much as we love to, add content and manipulate and do stuff, there are times where we need to know how things are related to each other, because we may not always know, or we may need stuff to help us out. And so what we're going to do is add this style, and all we're going to do is do a simple highlight. And I think this is a good example. I've seen others do this. And so when we find something, we're not really background color, we're just going to make it yellow. And so when we find the thing we need, we're just going to mark it yellow as found, because I think that's pretty easy to do. So now we're going to do this. We're going to have a div, and then we're going to do an H1. Let's see if this works. Sweet. So we back this up here. we're going to have a div, and then this arrow greater than coming down means that inside of there is going to be an h1 element. So this relationship right here denotes that h1 is going to be a child of a div. And then we have this, which, you know, signifies an ID, and we're going to call this main. So let me go ahead and fidget this real quick. And now we have this, and we have do some stuff. Awesome. So let's come down into here. Let's make something else. Let's do a div. We're going to not do that. We're going to put a div in there. We're going to put another div in there. And then we're going to give that thing an ID called child. Sweet. Little child. And once again, I'm not a master of Emmet. There are a million things you could do with this shorthand stuff. I am just doing the bare minimum to, I don't know, make it flow a little bit better. Now we have this, an ordered list, item 1, item 2 and 3. And in the middle one, we're going to call this kid, because why not? And that's all the things we need for what we're going to traverse. Let's space this out just so, you know, everything looks okay. And then we're going to need some buttons. We're going to want to click and do stuff. We're not always going to need buttons for everything there is in life. These are just to show us, you know, we click something and then something happens. There may be instances where you want things to happen without a click. But that's neither here nor there. We're just doing simple examples. So we're going to find the h1 parent. The next thing we're going to want to do is find little child parents. And then we want to go find siblings. Now, like in all these videos you've seen in this video, this is not exhaustive. There are many, many, many ways you could go and, you know, find, traverse, animate, all that kind of stuff. And this is just to get your feet wet, to show you what's out there. And then when you do your own projects, whether I ask you in class or you do them on your own, you kind of have a soft feel of how things flow and how they should go. So we have this open right here. All right, awesome. There's no CSS, so we just have this super basic stuff right here. And let's come in. We got our boilerplate. For some reason, that was hard for me to say. So the first thing we do is we find the parent. So let's come in. We're going to find a parent dot click. Got our nice fat arrow function. And you may see me toggle between single and double quotes. You should probably have something later on, like a linter or whatever, that changes these all for you. I am notorious for jumping between the two. Don't be like me. It's a bad habit. It doesn't kill your code, but yeah. In case you wonder why I jump between the two, there is no rhyme or reason. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, and when we click on find parent, which is find parent right here, we're going to look for main, which is our h1 right here, and we want to find the parent. So when we do find the parent, we're going to chain this, add class, and then we're going to add highlight to it. We saved it. Let's come in here. And it's almost looking like it's highlighting itself, which I guess you could say it is. But we see now that the div, which is the parent of the h1, as you see this is indented in, now has a class called highlight. So we'll refresh this to turn that off. and that's how you find the parent. But if we want to, what if you want to find all the parents? Let's go ahead and copy this. Once again, always be careful when you're copying and pasting. You may find yourself on the job for 2 hours and, of course, paid, and you realize you copied and pasted something wrong in, and a coworker laughs at you, and then you go on lunch. So now we're going to click Find Parents, if I remember right. We're going to look for child. So we're going to click Find Parents down here, and it's going to look for child, and everything that's a parent, it's going to highlight. Cool. Let's do that. And that highlights everything because this is kind of funny. So this is the child. So this is a parent. This is a parent. Okay, this is a sibling. This is a sibling, which is why, you know, nothing's going on, you know, here. But the body is obviously a parent to this div. So that gets a highlight. And then HTML wraps body, and that gets a class as well of highlight. And so this may sometimes, when you do stuff like this, be careful because it may have unintended consequences, because it will start here to here to here to here and then come up to your HTML. Now you may want to do something like that when you're getting a list to, you know, find out all the parents, then you get a list, and then you could, you know, I don't want to make changes if it's a body or HTML element, but just be careful when you're wholesale adding a class to all of the parents. But this is a harmful example, so we'll be fine. But what we want to do, this is kind of weird. Let's see if it indents. Okay. Find all the siblings. So we're going to change this to siblings. We're going to click. We're going to look for kid, which kid, if I remember, is the middle line item in this unordered list here. And so we're just going to type in siblings. Easy as that, right? Come in. We're going to click Find Siblings. And above and below, it'll inspect the DOM and say, hey, item 1 and item 3, both are item 2 siblings. We could see it looked for kid, which is what it shows in our code. And it looked for the DOM, looked in the DOM, I should say, and it added the class highlight to these two. And that is how you find all siblings. Now, there are a million other things that you could do with this. This is just to get your feet wet. I think for an intro class, this is good enough. And this is the main section of jQuery. If you have any questions or anything, comment down below. I could see if I could add on some supplemental stuff to this section. But yeah, thanks for joining.